Welcome, everyone. My name is Jane Hampton, and I work for the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. We're really glad you joined us and the folks at SERC to talk about accessible educational materials today. And I'll have the ladies introduce themselves in a minute. I just wanted to make sure that anyone that's with us has an understanding of who the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center is and what we do. So we call ourselves CPAC, and we are Connecticut's Parent Training and Information Center under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's our philosophy that parents make the best advocates for their children. The mission for the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center is to educate, support, and empower Connecticut's diverse families of children and youth with any disability or chronic condition, ages birth to 26, and the professionals who serve them. All of our staff are also parents of children who have a disability, myself included, although he's not a child anymore. As such, we would like to remind folks in this session, if you can be a little broader in your questions, to be considerate of the public nature and that your questions may need, other people will be listening, and think about your child and whether they would like the conversation to be public. The other thing to remind you is that we are not attorneys, and this does not represent any kind of legal advice. And that being said, I want to point out that we do have Spanish captioning if that's needed, and the information is in the chat to access that. I'm sorry I don't have someone to say it in Spanish today. So Smita and Claire, if you guys are ready, we'd love to open the floor to you.
Thank you, Jane. That was a very nice welcome. So we, Smita and I will individually, introduce ourselves, but we are from SERC, the State Education Resource Center. We believe in equity, excellence, and education. And today will be an overview of what are accessible educational materials. You'll hear us refer to them as AEM because it's shorter, and how can they support your child in school.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Smita Worah, and I'm a consultant at SERC. I'm from India, and I want to disclose at the onset that I have a disability. So I've got speech impairment, and if at any point you can understand me, please ask me to repeat myself, and I'm not going to be offended. I've been at SERC for over 12 years now, and I've been doing this all my life. So at SERC, I mainly work with the Assistive Technology and AEM initiative, and I provide statewide training. And we also have an AT learning library at SERC with many new AT equipments, with many new AT devices. So all of you are invited to come and borrow the devices, try them out with your children. Bring a plug for our AT corner. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you. I'm also a consultant at SERC. I started 4 days before the pandemic hit, so you can do the math for how long I've been there now. I was a former special education teacher, a dyslexia practitioner. That is my main initiative at SERC, is working with SLD dyslexia, specific learning disabilities dyslexia. And middle of last summer, I became a certified Google trainer. Smita and I work very closely together. She was my mentor, and she's also a good friend. So we spend a lot of time working together on, as she said, assistive technology and these accessible educational materials. So our first question, and you can unmute or drop in the chat if you'd like, what do accessible educational materials mean to you? What do you think of when you hear this term? And I'll allow a moment because I know some of you may be typing.
I say large print.
Okay, large print.
We would really like this to be an interactive session, but we want to learn from you, and we want to support you.
Mm-hmm. You can also think about who might utilize these materials, like what, for what purposes, that kind of thing.
iPads, okay.
So large print, I'm thinking that it could be, it's not always, but it could be someone with a visual impairment, right? So what other ways might a visually impaired person use accessible education?
So can I just go a step back and ask if any of you use books on CDs or listen to audio books? How many of you listen to audiobooks or, audio on the iPad?
Yeah.
So that is also accessible educational material. That is for all of us, right? Because when we are using audio, we are not reading. We are using a different kind of input. So if we think of accessible education material in the broadest sense, it's audiobooks and anything other than, but see, I know my colleagues who drive for an hour to SERC, they listen to audiobooks all the time on the drive, right?
Correct. In the chat, it also says iPads, which Kara said, and talk to text.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So when we think about accessible education material in the broadest sense, is anything, a different kind of input that we get from that may not be only vision. Sorry, I decided to step back and talk about audiobooks.
No, I think that's great. All right. So here we're looking at what are accessible educational materials. So they are curriculum materials that offer alternative to standard printed text, which can include Braille, large print, digital text, or audio. And it can also include materials and technologies usable for learning across the widest range. So Jane, you mentioned large print, that's absolutely on there. A lot of us use audiobooks, just listen to them in the car. Even if it's not an educational book, it's still the same type of accessible format.
So when we talk about IDEA, AEM is part of IDEA. And then when we talk about IDEA, this is the formal definition of AEM. There are four parts to AIM, as Claire has pointed out, but it also includes the technology. You cannot have an audio book without an audio player. You cannot have a digital textbook without an iPad or a computer, right? You have to remember that when we talk about AEM, the technology and the material, they go hand in hand.
Yes.
You have to give the student access to both these kinds of supports for them to access the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And someone on Facebook
Ask a question. I'm
Sure.
sorry. So were you talking?
I was just saying, like, someone on Facebook said also large print audiobooks for textbooks and voice over iPads or other screen readers.
Yes.
So someone that's watching us live in Facebook comment that. So I just want to share
Thank
too.
you.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask a question about AT and AEM based on what Smita just said, just made my gears start to turn a little bit when you were talking about like the iPad is what gives you access to speech to text or audiobooks. So is that a differentiation that's important, like the technology versus the curriculum?
No, they both go in hand. You can't have just the audio file without an MP3 player, right? So they both need to go hand, and this is what we as educated parents need to understand. Family members need to know that if my student has a book on Bookshare, right? My child also needs the iPad or the computer to access the Bookshare. So I'm saying that they both go hand, and you cannot have only the material without the technology. Only the technology without the material. Right? You need both of them to have access. Does it answer your question?
Was there someone else? I couldn't remember. I wasn't sure. No?
Well,
Okay. So we know that retrofitting curriculum materials, in other words, being made accessible after the fact, right? So I have a curricular material and then I make it accessible after the fact. That can be more complicated, it can be more expensive, it can take more time. So really our goal is to have these things be designed from the start to be accessible for all learners. And we're really lucky, I think, that we live in an age where the majority of Connecticut's students have access to Chromebooks, have access to the internet, and have access to these types of things. We do recognize, of course, that that's not true for all of our students.
But we have to remember one thing, that being digital does not equate it to be accessible,
Right.
right? If a science book is digital, it doesn't mean that it's accessible, because the science book might have pictures that are not described, right? Or it might have a link to a website where the student cannot access it. So it has to be digital and accessible, both at the same time, for it to be truly in, right? So you just can't have one part of it and not the other part.
Right. So for example, if a student does have a visual impairment and they cannot, see the screen very well, can I zoom in or can I do something to the screen to make it easier for them to read? If a student is dyslexic, can it be read to them? That kind of thing. So we're going to show you guys a short video. I did share my sound, so it should be working okay. But if you just want to give me a thumbs up when you hear it, that would help me. I don't think this part has sound.
The Georgia Department of Education.
Text-to-speech is an assistive technology that reads the text on a screen out loud and
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Let's try that again.
Text-to-speech is an assistive technology that reads the text on a screen out loud and provides both visual and audio access.
Many students benefit from text-to-speech, including students with cognitive and learning disabilities, students with processing disorders and ADHD, students with memory and focusing problems, and students who struggle with reading, writing, and spelling. Most text-to-speech applications provide visual highlighting in sync with the audio, and this can help students focus and increase comprehension.
The polite society of a civilized town, that astonishment soon departed upon taking my first daylight stroll through the streets of New Bedford.
Other benefits include improved word recognition and vocabulary development. Students using text-to-speech may choose more challenging content and may stick with it longer, and students using text-to-speech report feeling more independent and able to complete tasks at a similar rate as their peers. Text-to-speech is a universal design for learning strategy that provides multiple means of accessing content and benefits many diverse learners. Many cell phones and tablets, desktop computers, and laptops have built-in text-to-speech tools that students can use without requiring additional software. Let's take a look at some of the built-in text-to-speech tools. Macs, iPhones, and iPads have built-in text-to-speech with Speak Selection and Speak Screen, which can be turned on in the accessibility settings. On an iPad or iPhone, go to Settings, Accessibility, and select Spoken Content. Use the slider bar to turn on Speak Selection or Speak Screen. You can select from multiple voices.
Hello, my name is Nikki.
Adjust the speaking rate.
Speak selection, read selected content. Speak selection, read selected content.
And add custom pronunciations if you need to. Chromebooks have built-in text-to-speech that can be turned on in the accessibility settings. Under Text-to-Speech, turn on Enable Select to Speak. Microsoft Word has the Read Aloud Text-to-Speech option on the toolbar. To turn this on, go to Review and select Read Aloud. Press play to turn on text-to-speech with synchronized highlighting.
Text-to-speech is a type of assistive technology that reads digital text aloud.
Press the pause button to turn it off. In the settings options, you can change the reading speed and voice selection. Office 365 users can access the Immersive Reader, which provides text-to-speech highlighting along with additional learning tools like line spacing and...
Oh, goodness. What? Sorry, guys. Let me get back to where that was.
Office 365 users can access the Immersive Reader, which provides text-to-speech highlighting along with additional learning tools like line spacing and page color to improve scanning and ease eye strain. iBooks and Kindle ebook readers also include text-to-speech capability with highlighting that can be turned on in the settings. Many Kindle books also include WhisperSync technology that syncs audible professional narration with the Kindle ebook with real-time highlighting. Remember this tip: in order for text-to-speech to work, text must be in a digital format, sometimes called electronic, e-text, or ebook. Text-to-speech applications cannot read images of text. Some text, for example, copies made on a copy machine and uploaded or emailed, screenshots, or images taken with phones, may need to go through OCR or optical character recognition in order for the text-to-speech application to work. For more information on assistive technology for learning, see our additional videos.
So we thought to include this video because so many of our kids are using these devices, and there are so many parents who don't know how to use these features, right? So there's something very simple that a parent can do at home. If she has a PDF file on an iPad, they can turn on speak selection and it's going to read to them, right? So it's very important for us to include this in our presentation because we want people to see a variety of ways to use text to speech, see how it can support children. So how many of you did not know about some of these features? Yes, Vanessa?
We'll show a little bit more in depth later. And our emails are at the end of this presentation. And Smita and I are always available if you want to email us and say, I would love, a quick walkthrough of such and such feature on this platform. We can do Google tools, we can do Microsoft Office, we can do, a number of different tools. Yeah, iPads. Yeah. So please just reach out.
Vanessa, you have a comment to make?
Yeah, someone on Facebook just said when using the screen readers, teachers that scan things into the Google Classroom need to be aware on the fact that students that use voice over cannot access materials scanned in PDF format.
Absolutely.
So for the PDF format in Google Classroom, you have to use an add-on called SnapWriter, I think.
I'll put it in the chat, but we can talk more about that. That parent is more than welcome to email us, and we're happy to do that. And that's a PDF reader. Excuse me.
It's called SnapWriter, and it will read any PDF document once you convert it. So
and they use it with Google, with their Google platform?
Yes. So, but you need to do a couple of steps with it, and they can contact Claire and myself for a further demonstration on that. So that is going to take about it. You should also download the stuff and then how to use it.
Yeah.
Right. So
just checking to see if there are any other questions before we keep going. Okay. Go ahead, Smita, sorry.
So children may need AEM if they struggle with reading and comprehending grade level materials in school, right? Or they maybe they may find it difficult to do the homework, and they might be not able to read at grade level material because different environment. These are the students who need AEM, right? But for AEM, they need to have what is called a reading disability to get books from Bookshare.
Yep, and we'll go into that in more detail in a little bit.
Okay.
So the question here is, well, is my child eligible for AEM? So if they are struggling, and these are the state's definitions. If they are struggling with reading and engaging in educational materials, activities involving text-based materials, or are blind, or have a visual impairment or perceptual or reading disability, or have physical limitations that make it difficult to hold or manipulate a book, or focus or move the eyes to read. Okay, so these would be the eligibility requirements for a student to get AEM.
And so the first one talks about students with dyslexia and learning disability, right? The students with dyslexia and learning difficulty often struggle with reading and engaging in activities that involve reading text-based material. So if your child has dyslexia or a reading disability, then your child is automatically eligible for getting books from Bookshare.
And the dyslexia is by far the most common learning disability. It's estimated that 1 in 5 of the general population is dyslexic at some level. So I think that is an important thing to think about when considering, well, how many students might need AEM, for example. Yes, Sarah, I can put the link, if you remind me, please, at the end, I would be happy to put the link in the chat for us, or I can also embed it in the presentation as well.
And Jane, we can send you the presentation in a PDF format so that you can share it with the participants afterwards, if that works for you, Jane.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll put up our email as well, Kara, for you to reach out.
So just remember that all students who have dyslexia may be eligible for AEM, right? So, and they may support from Bookshare, Learning Ally, or one of those websites.
So can I ask another question?
Sure.
Of course.
I had a family whose student had dyslexia, and he also showed very poor visual motor skills on his assessments as well. And the recommendation from the examiner, who was external, was Bookshare, Learning Ally. He had all that for general reading, but he felt that he also needed large print for subjects like math that might not be a lot of content reading, but because of his visual motor issues. And the team said, well, he has dyslexia, that doesn't go with large print. And I said, but it's not for dyslexia that he needs the large print, it's for his visual motor impairment. And they said, but his disability is dyslexia, and therefore he doesn't qualify for large print.
No, but it's a like you cannot separate one disability from another. Child may have more than one disability, right? And it's up to us as educators support the child to access the education and to participate and engage in it, right? So life is so easy to do. If you have anything If you have anything on the computer, automatically you can make it the large print. I don't know what is wrong, because even sometimes we need large print, right? I can't read with my glasses anymore. So large print is really easy to do. You don't have to do anything. As long as you have it on the computer and you increase the font size, it becomes large print.
Yeah, and if, for example, let's say that we're talking about a math textbook and a student is having difficulty with that text, like a consumable workbook, right? You can still do a number of things. You can scan in the workbook and use the PDF reader so that the student can A, read the text, and also so that it can be bigger, right? The student can be photocopying it, enlarging the text itself. I mean, there's a number of, or if you take, I just happen to have a piece of paper here, so if you take, say the first section, right, enlarge that on a piece of paper, the second section, enlarge that, right? So it's really not something that is difficult to get for a student, especially with digital access that we have these days. I mean, I could enlarge my screen right now by just hitting Control+. So the big thing really with a digital format is to make sure that when it zooms properly, that the text lines up correctly. Vanessa, you're raising your hand?
Yeah, the mom on Facebook also mentioned that images cannot be read by the screen reader. And many teachers scan things this format, making the materials inaccessible to the students because of the images?
The images have to be made accessible. There's something called on PowerPoint, on Microsoft, something called accessibility checker. If you go to the accessibility checker, all images need to be described. For example, if we made this PowerPoint accessible, the picture would say that it's a classroom picture with a teacher and two students, and the teacher they're sitting at a table, the student is smiling and they're looking at a book, right? So accessibility feature will tell you how to describe each picture. And we are
And
not
that's
there
something that
again.
the teacher should be doing. If they're sending out a Google slide for the student to work on, it's very easy to add in alt text. Because you're right, if a screen reader looks at a picture and there's nothing to describe it, then it doesn't know what to do. There are apps out there that can sometimes kind of guess at what it's seeing, but they're not very reliable. And they certainly would be too cumbersome for most students to use.
So alt text is the way to go, and all Microsoft applications have that in the accessibility toolbar. If you go to and you say add all text, so when you add all text, so the picture, the screen reader will know this is text and it's going to read out the text.
And that's why we're really hoping that, more teachers will see this, because we cannot implement what we don't know how to do. And if we don't know how to put in alt text, or if we don't know that we should be putting in alt text, then it's not going to happen. So we're really trying to get this information out there as much as we can. And I know that there are teachers and I'm going to say adults in general out there who are a little bit, afraid of technology, or they don't consider themselves tech savvy, but we want to be clear that this is something that is doable, it is learnable, and it's not something that requires, an excessive amount of technology knowledge and skill.
Yes, Kara, I agree with you that it will help our aging population as well.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
or just if the image is too small, it's hard to see, yeah, absolutely.
So if a parent thinks that the child needs AEM, they should talk to the PPT.
Yep.
Right.
So it is the responsibility of the school to provide AEM, and they also, depending on what they're providing, they may also provide some accessible technology that's matched to the child's needs. So Smita mentioned audiobooks. Of course, and we can't listen to audiobooks without some kind of player for that, as well as headphones if necessary. And it, of course, depends on what type of technology we're talking about. We also want to point out, too, something that's really important is that not only is the student fully trained on how to utilize the technology, but also the staff that work with them and the parents.
And the parents and the family members, too.
Yeah.
For example, if the student is living with the grandparents, the grandmother should know how to use it. The student has siblings, older siblings that are supporting the learning, the older siblings should know how to use it.
Right, because I think of it this way. When I was a paraprofessional years and years ago, I spent some time subbing for another professional whose student was nonverbal, and he used an iPad to communicate. And if he was in gym class, and let's say I had stepped out for a moment, he wanted to say something, I shouldn't be the only adult in the room who knows how to help him communicate. This was a 5-year-old, so he wasn't fully adept at using the technology yet. So there should be any adult that works with the student in any capacity should at least know the basics of how to help that student, because our students don't, stop needing this AEM if they go into science class, if they go into French class, right? It's all the same. The usage may look different in different classes, sure, or they may not need it in a certain class because the material is already accessible to everyone. But every single teacher should know at least the basics of how to use that, so that they can help the student, especially if there's troubleshooting needs.
Kara, I really like your question. Thank you for the question. You asked whether students with ADD and ADHD are eligible for AEM. They are eligible for AEM, but where they get it from would be different. If your student with ADD and ADHD has a diagnosed reading disability, then they can get it from Bookshare or Learning Aid. Otherwise, they would have to get it from other free resources that are available. And if you want to talk about the other resources, please contact Claire and myself, and we can walk you through the other resources. Today, we don't have time for this overarching, broad 3-hour presentation, right? This is just an introduction to AEM to give you guys an idea of it, so you can contact us further for any other information. Yes, Vanessa, you had a point.
We'll also share the website that we have created in partnership with Connecticut State Department of Education specifically around AEM, and it's designed to be friendly for parents and educators. So we'll share that as well.
Yes.
I have a question on Facebook. Someone asked, blue light classes, whose responsibility does that need fall? On a family of the students or on a school?
Can you repeat the first part, please, Vanessa? Your voice cut out for a moment.
Blue light classes. Whose responsibility does that need? The person just put blue light classes, whose responsibility?
So blue light glasses, my understanding, are supposedly, and I'm not, please understand that I am not an eye doctor, are supposedly supposed to be for helping students with screen fatigue, right? If the screen is too bright. I have not seen research that shows that helps with reading at all, but it may help with headaches.
So if it is in the IEP, it depends where the blue light glasses are. If it is in the IEP, then the school is responsible for it. If it is not in the IEP, the school is not responsible for it.
Keep in mind too that the Chromebook has, well, actually all laptops should have settings that can help adjust the brightness of the screen or the contrast and colors of the screen that would make it more comfortable for people to read. But blue light glasses, my understanding, that would not technically fall under AEM, right, Smita, but it could fall under assistive technology.
Yeah, and then if it's under assistive technology, if it's documented in the IEP, then the school is responsible for it. If it's if the parent wants and the parent feels it's good for the child, then it's dependent. Then the school is not responsible for it.
Yeah, so that's a conversation that you would need to have with a PPT. So what can the school do to assist the child with accessible educational materials? So we can improve access to text-based academic activities and non-academic activities, right? Allowing them to participate in grade level activities, increasing opportunities for meaningful interaction with texts, and increasing independence in a variety of environments.
Kara, did I answer your question about ADD? Okay, thank you.
And dyslexia too, ADD, ADHD, and learning disabilities, the comorbidity rate is around 80%. So it wouldn't surprise me that if a student had a learning disability, that they may also have a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD. That's very common.
You may need to know what the primary disability of the child is.
Yes.
If it has anything to do with reading, impacting reading, it's for the PPT to decide. So there is no Bookshare police who will come out after PPT if you say that this child needs Bookshare.
Yeah, I'm actually, Smita, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go back to the eligibility piece because I think that's where we're getting some confusion. So
sure.
Here's the eligible. So there's two things that we need to think about. Is the student eligible for AEM? That's a pretty broad thing because if a student is struggling with reading and engaging in educational activities involving text-based materials, then they can be eligible, right? And a lot of students maybe with ADD or ADHD may have that difficulty. However, what we're also talking about is once a student is eligible for AEM, there are different pathways depending on how they're eligible that students can access specific types of AEM. For example, Smita has referenced Bookshare and Learning Ally throughout this session frequently, and those are specific sources that provide digital and audio books, and not all students who are eligible for AEM are going to be eligible for those specific sources. However, we're going to talk about what sources students would be eligible for regardless of why they're needing AEM. Please let me know if that didn't make sense.
Because remember, it's all about the copyright criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a copyright criteria that
Right. And what I wanted to just clarify is, or I'll just give an example. So an example of a student who would not qualify for Bookshare and Learning Ally would be a student who was an English learner, right? But they don't have any documented form of a disability. So they're not going to be eligible for the copyright that Bookshare and Learning Ally require, but they're still going to require accessible educational materials. All right, so we're going to talk about what that would look like for a student like that. Okay, so here are some of the AM resources. There are a lot out there. Bookshare, like we said, is a paid service from the state, and there are only certain students who are eligible to utilize Bookshare depending on their documented disability. The other two, described and closed caption media, which will demonstrate both inclusive, those are completely free.
So Bookshare is free for Bookshare is free there, but it's only free for those students who have a documented reading disability. The kids don't have to pay to get a Bookshare account. But
Sorry, that was So Bookshare is still free through the state, but they have to have a documented need for it. The other two, they don't.
And learning
about voice, my understanding is Bookshare is an electronic voice. Yes. And what about the other two?
Learning Ally is a human voice, but it's a paid service and it's $120 a year.
Mm-hmm.
But DCMP and Inclusive are free. Inclusive is relatively new. It just came out a month ago. So these are two websites that we will be demonstrating.
Yeah, I want to go through. So I'm just going to go through just in order here. The eligibility for Bookshare. So these are qualified students who are eligible for Bookshare, and it's at no cost. But they have to have one of these qualifications. They are blind, visual impairment, or a perceptual or reading disability, which includes dyslexia, or otherwise unable through physical disability to hold or manipulate a book. Okay, so the district would be involved in getting that access for you.
Somebody with cerebral palsy who cannot turn the page of a book, right?
Exactly.
Would be eligible for Bookshare.
Exactly. So this is dcmp.org. You would need to sign up for a membership, but it's free. I'm just checking on the time here. I don't know that we have much time to go through it, but I do encourage you to go through it at your own time because it's a very, very cool website. So there are thousands of accessible videos available to students at all grade levels in all subjects you could think of. It's described and captioned educational media, great resource for teachers as well. A lot of the videos are available in multiple languages.
Great resource for families as well.
Yes, great resources for family as well. They have everything from science and math and English language arts and social studies and all the other kind of really cool things that you could think of. So I do encourage you to check that out.
And it's a free
website. I remember when I registered, it took a day or two for them to get back to me, and then my account was up and ready. Okay. This is inclusive.cast.org. Again, it's free. You have to have an account, but it is free. This would be a great thing for teachers to use as well, and it does because it does integrate with Google Classroom. Like Smita said, they're very new, so they don't have that many texts available yet. But I'm assuming that they're going to keep adding more as they go, right, Smita?
Yeah.
So you're seeing a screenshot here. Basically, what a student does is they select a text that they want, or a teacher can assign it to them, and the text, there are three levels of difficulty for text. If you're familiar with sites like News ELA or ReadWorks, it's the same thing where you can have the same text but at different levels of difficulty. And so the student is answering the question, how well do you know this word associate, right? They can add it to their word bank. If they don't, everything is available from text to speech, so they can hear everything read to them. They can change the font size, the type of font, the color, the contrast, all that good stuff. Multiple words within these stories are defined with pictures in addition to like a word dictionary, which is really cool. So like the word coyote would be, I would see a picture of like coyote if I clicked on it. And Smita showed me something else really cool with this. During the story, the student can also rate how they're feeling emotionally. And I think that's a really nice feature to see how they're feeling towards the story, and just a little nice way for the teacher to gauge the student's emotions at that time.
And engagement, because a lot of kids are not engaged with learning right now. This would improve their engagement as well.
So these links are built right into the PowerPoint, so you don't have to worry about writing them down because we will be sending these out to you. So Smita, we have enough time. I was hoping we could show them ctam.org, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that that is a clickable link when I do that. So let me just reshare my screen. Hold on a moment, please. And so this is a website that Smita and I have been working on, like I said, in partnership with CSDE. All right. And so these are the definition of accessible educational materials here, all the information that we just talked about, examples, who is eligible and for what type of source, AEM source. There's a really great link here. Oh, we got to fix that one, Smita. That's I don't know why that.
And they changed their website again.
So Kara, you asked a question. Can the students ask questions that are answered for them? In other words, are these sites interactive?
What do you mean?
Like ask questions of the teacher or of the story? I can't hear you, Kara. I think you're muted.
So if they have like questions as they're reading the material and they're confused or they need, is some of it answered for them, or they just?
No,
it's not like
read.
that.
No,
yeah, it's just read. Yeah, it's just read.
Yeah,
okay.
But there are notes on the Clusive website. There's notes that the student can add on the side with voice or with text, and then the teacher could respond. Yeah. And there's dictionaries too, so that they can kind of get more information if there's a
I think it is important for you guys to play around with some of the websites and then see what your needs are. Then we can come back to you and answer any questions that you might have.
So these are the eligibility considerations, the technology and design considerations here. That's on the first page. These are the recent changes that were made, and Smita and I went over those. So that the changes to the definition of blind persons or persons with other print disabilities was changed in, I think, 2018. So that's that information there, as well as specialized formats has been removed, and it's now replaced with the term accessible formats. So remember, an accessible format of a text can look different depending on the student that needs it. This talks about eligibility again. Okay. This talks about obtaining and utilizing AEM, so it walks you through step by step how this works. So once we've determined, yes, the student needs AEM, then we talk about how are we selecting the materials, including the instructional context, what kind of formats are needed, right? So a blind student is going to need different formats and things than a dyslexic student. Then how are we going to acquisition these items? If you are looking for Braille and large print, a hard copy, this is Nancy's contact information, and that's how you would access that. You should be aware that it would take about 6 months in advance to ensure that you would get Braille and large print on time. But keeping in mind that if you have a digital format, getting something in large print is not as time consuming as it used to be.
So it is recommended that in the summer, once you finalize your textbook list, you should contact Nancy and see so that you can get the books by by fall when a student starts school, right? Because you don't want a student not to have a book and the school is already started. But that would be a violation of FAPE.
Is this website live now?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then there's the use here. So again, when we talked about this before, it is so important that not only does the student know how to use the materials independent of their teacher. So if an adult was not available to them, could they still, get the text read to them, right? Because, sometimes teachers have subs, sometimes the student's in a different classroom, right? So we really want to have the student be as independent as possible when using these materials. And we also want to make sure that the family that lives with the student knows how to use these materials so the student can do distance learning or homework or whatever it is at home. So we really want to consider the entire team in helping the student to utilize these materials. And then if I go back up here, these are some resources that we have. So this is a nice flow chart that helps me determine, does a student need accessible educational materials and how do I get them and what sources do I need them from? This is a nice brochure that we've put together. This is more for special educators, but this is a topic brief on accessible educational materials. There's some information specifically for families. This is a recommended purchase order language for districts. These are some, again, some more of the legal stuff over here, and then some educator and family information here. This is our contact information is here, as well as the names of some other organizations that provide training or technical assistance on these topics. These are some frequently asked questions that you may need. And then, of course, there's our contact information again. Okay. And Thomas Boudreau is the consultant at the state that works with us on this this topic.
So we have come to the end of our presentation. Are there any questions from your side, Jane, that you think families would need more information in? Jane and Vanessa?
I think your website looks like it's very comprehensive and someplace where we can probably get a lot of answers and send parents when they have questions. Would you agree? Is it written in a way that families will be able to?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, that was definitely the goal. There's some information that may not be, applicable to them, such as the legal language that's there, but there is it was on resources, I think, right, specifically for families as well.
Great. It's a little more complicated, I think, than what I was expecting, only because. Sure. No, I think it's great. I think what I learned from what you guys talked about today is the curricular nature of it. So like the blue glasses question was really good because that's not really a curricular need, right? It's not something that will provide curriculum to the family. So that wouldn't be, but as Smita said, if there's another need, it may be AT for another purpose. There may be a child with for another reason, fatigue is really a big deal for them, and this will maybe help them. But really recognizing that curricular aspect of it is really important, I think.
But remember, AEM is all about access, participation, and progress, right? It's all about access in the curriculum, participating in it, and making progress in the curriculum. That's why we provide AEM and AT to the student, because we want them to be at par with their grade level counterparts, right? That is the goal of our mission, is to make sure that our students are accessing the curriculum that their grade level peers are accessing. And AEM and AT is one way of providing that access.
So you asked what questions might we hear, and those of you who are on the call that are CPAC folks, please feel free to ask your questions. One thing that I wonder that I've heard in the past is the kids that need Learning Ally or Bookshare, sometimes the teachers are like, but they have to practice their reading. And so I think understanding yes, of course they have to practice their reading. If they have dyslexia, they're working on that every day. But this is really to access the content, not the skill of reading. And I think that's a concept that's often lost, is that what is the purpose of the assignment? Is it to practice their reading as a person with a reading disability, or is it to learn science or social studies or
exactly
content? And I think that's always a question that needs to be asked, is what is the purpose of the work that they're doing right now?
Because in science class, the purpose of the reading is not to read, it's to access the content. Even from third grade onwards, even in ELA, the purpose is not reading, to interpret, it's to analyze. When you look at the standards, I'm not telling you to read. They're asking you to do things with the reading, right? To answer questions, to analyze, to interpret, to compare and contrast. For that, even if I don't read, if I hear the content, I can still do that. And that's the way I'm accessing the curriculum.
I think that's a really important point. Yeah.
I'm very, I'm the dyslexia practitioner. I'm very much believe that students need to be taught to learn how to read correctly. But while we are working on that, that should not preclude them from accessing other parts of the curriculum.
Thank you, ladies. Anybody else with any additional questions? I did put the poll. Did everyone see the poll?
Just going to reshare so that this is our contact information. We are working from home, so it's better to access us with email right now, but this will be in the PowerPoint that I will send. I'll send it to Jane in a little bit. I'll just make sure all the links are good and we'll be good to go.
And we will send the video with the PowerPoint, but it does take us probably at least a week right now. We have a lot of people on vacation. So thank you to everybody for their patience. And thanks from Leona for you guys. Thanks, Smita and Claire, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jane, if you have any questions or need any further information, please feel free to reach us and we can help you out.
And if we have questions from anyone on the call where you have I'd really like these guys to come back and talk about, I want them to just let us know, and we would love to invite them back for another conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure. Thank you, ladies. Thank you
so much.
Good afternoon.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
I'm going to stop Facebook and I'm going to stop recording.